Zillow and Joe Resinello.
So as Joe and I always say, the left is teeing it up. Today's no exception.
That are taking this down, are they not haters? I think they might be listening to the Frontline with Joe and Joe.
Should be.
And once more, dear friends, we are going way into the breach. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. And we got a great conversation for you tonight because there's a lot of nonsense, as always.
And we have made America great again.
Where's the woke media when it comes to that? Our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. Joe, I think we're on.
I think so.
Hey, everybody. Sorry we missed you last week. Well, sorry, not sorry. It was Easter. So we were celebrating Easter with our families. And we hope you all had a wonderful Easter. And it's still Easter.
Yes,
we're still in the octave, and today is Divine Mercy Sunday. And speaking of which, Joe and I, if you go on Veritas Catholic Network and download their app, I don't know if it's up yet, but it will be up. We did an interview with Father Chris Alar, which broadcast this afternoon at 5 o'clock, where we talked about divine mercy. And it's something that we need to talk about. There's God's justice, there's God's mercy. And we all need to avail ourselves of that mercy and what the church teaches us as the way to avail ourselves of that mercy. Debbie Grace is in the chat room. Hey, Debbie, happy Divine Mercy Sunday. Absolutely. Say it right back at you. So, yeah, we have a great show lined up for you tonight. We were off for 2 weeks. And when I always say that the left is serving it up, we missed 2 weeks of stories. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. I sent Joe like 25 stories. He goes, whoa, that's enough. We're not going to get to 3. What are you doing? But it was just, there was so much to talk about. So we tried to combine certain conversations and turn them into larger conversations that we all know that you're going to want to talk about. So we're going to get into that. But remember, please, wherever you are, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook. Please follow Holy Faith Media, like and subscribe and share anything you could do where you're watching to help us with the algorithm, particularly if you hit that little bell for the notifications. That really helps. Like this video, that really helps. Certainly share this video, that really helps. It all helps. We're not asking for money. We know a lot of people ask for money. We do mention we have our Patreon. If you want to subscribe and throw in a few bucks every month, you can find patreon.com/the Frontline with Joe and Joe. We mention it because many of you out there have already contributed and may want to contribute more as we move forward. Okay. So please remember that. Also, we're on the Crusade channel on Monday afternoons, crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Please take advantage of the 30-day free trial. We think you'll love the lineup down there. Mike Church, Rick Barrett, Mike from Restoring the Faith is on there. Kennedy Hall, guest host with Mike from Restoring the Faith this past week. So Crusade Channel is an awesome place for news and, quite frankly, a very entertaining radio station. And, of course, Frontline with Joe and Joe are there. And, yes, as I mentioned, please download the Veritas Catholic Network app. That is primarily an interview show that Joe and I do on AM radio. However, like all AM radio stations now, they have an app you could download. You could watch past episodes. So we would encourage you to do that. And in the meantime, let's rock and roll. Any comments, any questions, anything like that? I got my eye on the chat room.
So we're going to start out with Mitch McConnell and the Supreme Court Justice, our favorite justice of them all, Clarence Thomas.
He is our favorite.
Oh,
he is without a doubt. You would think it would be the Paisan from New Jersey.
But he's good too.
He's right there with him. But Thomas has been there longer, and quite frankly, he has a few more battle wounds because of people like Joe Biden.
But they had some noteworthy statements this past week. We want to share them with you. This is what McConnell had to say. From election law to environmentalism, to radical social agendas, to the Second Amendment, parts of the private sector keep dabbling in behaving like a woke parallel government. This is the important part. Corporations will invite serious consequences if they become a vehicle for the far left mob to hijack our country from outside the constitutional order. The minority leader argued that Americans do not need or want big business to amplify disinformation or react to every manufactured controversy. He went on to say it's jaw-dropping to see powerful American institutions not just permit themselves to be bullied, but to join in the bullying themselves. He's 100% right. And to be honest with you, if you ask me, I don't think it's good business. It's just simply not good business. If you have a business, large or small, you're there to make money. You're not a nonprofit, and you have all types of people. Listen, we live in a pluralistic society. It doesn't do anybody good to create enemies via, like almost like a social media chat room in the workplace, because it's not productive. It's not good for the product, and it's not good for the business. Sadly, everyone thinks that they're on Facebook almost at work. And it shouldn't be the case. And frankly, the CEO should set the tone. I think a lot of this is going to come back to bite them, because eventually, especially if
Well, we'll talk about some examples, but go ahead.
But I mean, like, let's just say that the election laws don't get put forth. What is it? HR 1 that's basically trying to get put forth. Say it doesn't pass and we have a fair and free election, which is the United States is all about. Eventually, the Democrats are going to lose. It's just the way politics go. Frankly, I think big tech, if they lose big, they're going to get crushed.
Well, see, the thing is, and we'll get into it in a second. Dennis is in the chat room. Hey, Dennis, amongst other people, Seraph is out there, Michelle and others. Dennis, we've left Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett alone only because right now we haven't been following them all together closely. But I'm sure, Dennis, in the near future, we're either going to have something very good to say about them or not so good. We'll find out. Tonight, we're talking about McConnell and Clarence Thomas, who we know is good. Let's start with this. Can we please get back to, I want to piggyback on what Joe was saying. First things first, businesses need to do business. And if you don't just do business, I don't care about social advocacy. I don't want to go into Coca-Cola and tell them, you need to give $1 million to the Frontline with Joe and Joe because we support the Catholic Church. No, I don't necessarily want to. I don't even want Coca-Cola necessarily to give money to pro-life causes or pro-family causes. Okay, just how about this? How about just make Coca-Cola? Just make Coca-Cola.
Sell it.
Okay, just make a Coca-Cola and sell it. Some people don't like your product. Most people do. That's why you're a big, wealthy, powerful corporation. Okay, but shut your mouth because nobody cares. But this does beg the question that I did want to ask you, okay? Because companies are not just doing business. Bankers don't just do banking. Goldman Sachs puts rainbow flags all over the place. Coca-Cola talks about racism in Georgia. Big tech says if you pass a law protecting religious liberty in Indiana from a few years ago, we're going to shut you down, okay? Do you know that they've calculated this is my question to you, and I would ask the audience too, okay? They've calculated this. Why are they doing this? Because I'm going to give you my opinion. I'd like your answer. Because it seems to me that now that they've gone beyond a critical mass in terms of their profits, in terms of their projected sales and everything else, they really feel like, well, even if it costs us a couple bucks, we're still so very rich and we're so very rich and powerful. So if half of America doesn't buy our products, we got the rest of the world to buy our products. It seems like they seem to have this arrogance that they don't even care what we do. Do you feel that?
I just think they're blind. I think it's bad decision. It's a bad business decision. There is some arrogance, and they get away with it because the press is on their side. And frankly, this is the ideas of the elites, their circle. But they don't, like Joe, they don't run in our circles, just like I don't run in their circles. I don't live in their communities. My kids don't go to school with them. I don't share in their ideas.
Do you think, and again, we're asking everybody, but I'm asking Joe, do you think that maybe it's because the boycott hasn't happened yet? Well, because if it strikes me the way you phrase it usually is that they may be taking advantage of the fact that they think, they might be right, that we're not going to organize on a mass scale and let's say, boy, we're going to get into Rand Paul and boycott Major League Baseball or boycott Coca-Cola or boycott Burger King, like Bill Donahue from the Catholic League called for a few months ago. Or maybe they bank on the idea that we're just so indifferent that you know what, we can say anything we want because those conservatives are not going to say anything. They're going to keep buying Coca-Cola. But the crazies on the left, they won't buy our product. So let's cave into them. Again, I'm asking
Well,
because I don't know.
We could look at Starbucks as as an example. I mean, a few years ago, they basically said straight out. They said, which again, I think was bad for business. I personally think it's a foolish mistake. They said, if you believe in traditional marriage, we don't want your business. Solely. If you solely believe in traditional marriage, we don't want your business.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you say that? Like, you're not here. If you want to become a senator, run for the Senate. Like, if I was on that board, because the board is basically coming from outside the firm to sit, I would say to the CEO, why did you say that? Why did you say that? It's just a bad idea. But frankly, getting back to that, I believe in traditional marriage. And frankly, I'm not alone. Jewish people believe in it too. Muslim people believe in it too.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Let's get it straight right now. This is the opinion of Joe and Joe. Okay. The vast majority of Americans
of the world Joe,
do not believe in gay marriage.
No,
okay.
of the world.
But they're selling us the idea that most people agree with it. No, we're tolerant because mostly Christians, okay, mostly Christians in America, we are a tolerant people, and tolerance and acceptance are two different things. We're tolerant, okay, but we're not accepting. I wanted to interject that because I think they lie in their polls when they do their polls. Well, we saw that because they had Wisconsin in the election up by 17 points on the day of election back in November, and supposedly Biden barely won Wisconsin. Okay, so we know that they lie in their polls. They try to convince you, oh no, the American people are very accepting of gay marriage. I don't buy that for a second.
No, but I don't. As a result, I don't buy and I like Starbucks coffee. I don't go.
They make a mean espresso.
I enjoy it. I always did. Some people don't. They say it's bitter. I like strong coffee. I don't go. The point is, we don't have enough conviction. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment. I mean, I want to talk about what Clarence Thomas had to say.
Sure.
But sadly, Americans don't have the conviction to carry through. Why are you watching the NFL? Why are you watching the NBA?
I was thinking about that coming over here.
Why?
No, and this is from my heart. This is absolutely from my heart. I'm not ashamed to say that I'm a New York Jets fan. I know they've stunk my whole life, okay? I'm 53 years old, and I remember I've been watching the Jets for just about 50 years. I remember as a little kid when Riggins first came into the league and things like that. I'm a New York Jets fan. I felt a real sacrifice. And I know a lot of people might poo-poo this, but when you're so accustomed to something, and I love the Jets, I'm a loyal supporter of the New York Jets, and I love football, okay? I like watching the playoffs, and I like watching the Super Bowl, except for the halftime show. But the point is that I felt a loss because I do like watching football, and I feel like they took that away from me. They took what should be, we were talking about neutrality in business, right? Just do business. Just if you're a bank. Well, if you're a football team, just do business. Tell Colin Kaepernick, no, we don't make political statements in our workplace. So stop, stand up. And if you don't care about the national anthem, that's your business. Take care of it somewhere else. But don't do it here. Okay? I didn't watch the Jets all year. Joe didn't watch the Jets all year. Listen, I think the year before you didn't watch them either.
I don't.
So Joe's 2 years strong.
No, but it just.
But the thing is, you and I both have made a decision for something we like very much. Nobody's going to question. I know Joe loves the Jets, and so do I. Okay? Something we like very much to say, you know, I know something, I'm just not going to do it. And that's what we need more of. Not because we're great, but because just to make a decision to say, you want to know what? You're not going to bully us anymore.
No, but that's what you have to do. I mean, like, if you want to change things, money changes the dial. But let's talk what Clarence Thomas had to say.
Okay.
Because this is what he said.
Dennis said, I look like I'm 23. You're the man, Dennis. Thanks, brother.
He said, if part of the problem is private, concentrated control over online content and platforms available to the public, then part of the solution may be found in doctrines that limit the right of private companies to exclude. Bottom line, what he's saying is eventually when the Republicans take control and this goes to the court, they're going to get banged. They should have kept their mouth shut. Twitter should have said to the Biden regime, listen, we're a business. You stick to politics. We stick to our business model. By the way, Twitter is boring without Donald Trump. And they lost money. It was a bad business decision.
Along those lines.
Bad.
It was terrible, terrible. Now, again, this does make me wonder, though, what they're thinking, because you would think that business people would worry about their bottom line, but it doesn't seem like they are. So it makes you wonder what they have up their sleeves. Remember, we are living in a crony capitalist system. This is not the free enterprise system, okay? So basically, they might see other ways of making up that revenue. Now, again, I don't know. They have to imagine, or they're seeing that there's a backlash. Dan Bongino did a video within the last couple of days, and he wasn't patting himself on the back, but he was saying, look, I said this a few years ago. He's talking about sports, okay? Said, I said this a few years ago. He said, it will take time, but eventually people are going to stop watching professional sports. Where have we seen that? NFL ratings are down, by the way.
Oh, the NBA.
Thursday night, NBA.
Shot.
That's why they announced a couple months ago, the wokeness is over. Black Lives Matter, that comes off the court. Okay, this whole idea of, well, we took 1 year, we took one for the team for you guys, LeBron James, for 1 year. We're not doing it anymore. Major League Baseball, all right, I would put a little bit above basketball and football. Okay, if people start abandoning Major League Baseball, that's going to be a real problem. But the Bongino's point was, he said it was going to take time, but eventually people are going to get fed up. Guess what? And we're going to talk about it more, because after Clarence Thomas, we're going to talk about Rand Paul. People are, thank God, thank the good Lord, people are starting to get real fed up, and people are starting to make conscious decisions about where they spend their money and how they spend their time.
And we were talking about this, but getting back to what Rand Paul said, specifically, he's basically speaking out against Coca-Cola, Major League Baseball, and Delta. This is what he had to say. He said, "We will see how well they do when half the country quits drinking Coca-Cola, when half the country quits using Delta. Publicly traded businesses usually don't get involved with politics because it hurts their bottom line to make half the country unhappy."
Right.
He basically went on to say, going woke should come at a price for them. And it should. You see, I wonder, though, to be honest with you, I'm skeptical if people actually put it down. I honestly, we control the narrative. Listen, the masses make the wheel turn. It's the way it works. We don't have a conviction. Americans, I've said this, they live on the surface. Most Americans care about what happens up into their front door, how much money they make. Bill Clinton said it perfectly. It's the economy, stupid. Many people live and die by that. These are the people I know. They live and die by that. These are people I work with and people I grew up with. They simply don't care. They don't care enough about anything.
Well, they might be forced to care.
I hope so. I mean, because ultimately it's going to impact you. I'm seeing it a little bit because I think the left overplayed their hand with the sports thing, and that affects a lot of people that wouldn't get involved. But as far as abortion, people don't care. They don't. It's sad.
It's funny you mentioned that. Just a pure digression on abortion. For as many people that don't care, if abortion was abolished tomorrow, those same people probably wouldn't care.
They don't care.
The only people who care are people like us, who are abortion abolitionists on one side, and we are extremists, but we admit it, okay? Because we think that's an acceptable extremism to protect human life, okay? And then the other side, the feminists. Most people in the middle, they're indifferent to abortion. I'm not saying it's right. Please don't take this the wrong way. Abortions are down. There's still last year over 600,000 abortions that have been committed in America last year, over 600,000. Okay. But the bottom line, that number represents a certain percentage of all the babies that are conceived in the United States. Most women have their babies. The vast majority of women have their babies. A lot of the people you're talking about, they're indifferent to abortion too. Now, why am I bringing that up? Because even on abortion, if you turned around and you had a real conservative that was for the abolition of abortion, most of those same indifferent people would be like, okay, that's where he is on abortion. Where are you on taxes? Where are you on this? Where are you on that? Because again, their indifference, we could actually gain from their indifference also, is my point. I'm not saying that they're right. I'm not trying to excuse it. But abortion in that regard, don't think that the vast majority of the American people are going to die on the abortion hill. I will. You will. They won't.
Well, the problem is, to be honest with you, I don't even think it's a conservative idea. It's a Christian idea. And to me, it speaks to your priority. You see, again, is God your priority? If it is, you're not for abortion. You don't have to be a conservative. You're not for abortion, because killing life is not a Christian idea. It simply isn't. It isn't.
Right.
So again, people don't, and this is a story we're actually going to talk about on the Crusade channel, talking about liberalism in Christianity. It doesn't guide their life. It doesn't guide their life. And this is where some of these, like, you know, say, I'm going to put down baseball. I'm going to put down Starbucks. I'm going to put down Coca-Cola. People don't care enough. They just don't care enough. And this is why we're where we're at in America. Frankly, it's been a slippery slope for a long, long haul, 50 years. And now we've come to this point.
Let's hope it tips the right way.
I hope it does.
We're out here. We're trying to help it tip the right way, along with a lot of other people out there. I want to bring up a point that Joe made. Okay, we know we're talking to primarily a Catholic audience, but this isn't directly only for Catholics. If you took a view, and again, you have to agree with the view, but my view is very simple. Who are those, right, especially right now, but it's been so for a very long time, who are those who attack you the most? If you're just what I say regular in a complimentary way, you wake up every day, you say your prayers, you go to church, you go to work, you raise your families, you live a good life, you follow the moral law, okay, just on a basic level, you don't bother anybody, okay, you work and play well with others, okay. Who are your biggest enemies? Your biggest enemies are those who would steal your labor. And who is stealing your labor when you think about it? And then who else is in your pocket, picking your pocket? On the one hand, you have the government stealing your labor. Confiscatory taxation is theft, okay? We won't get into it now. That is the biggest theft of your labor right there. And what does that do? That makes the government more powerful. Who else? Banks are stealing your labor, but we allow them to do that because we don't do anything about the fact that they enslave us for 30 years with a house and then 6 years for a car, however many years for a college loan, paying compound interest every year. That's a theft of your labor. And how else are they picking your pocket? The same way we started talking about this conversation. By selling you products, convincing you that you need those products when you don't really need them, and getting you to spend money on buying those products while at the same time punching you in the face, a la or vis-a-vis Coca-Cola and the rest of them.
But why do we do that?
No, that was my larger question. Thank you, Joe. Go ahead.
No,
why do we allow them to do that?
Because we don't know who we are. You know, I'm going to be honest with you. The greatest meme that I saw basically during this COVID crisis was the Amish. And it said, why doesn't COVID affect the Amish? That was one picture.
It doesn't? I didn't read it.
Well, the second picture was because they don't have a television. And it makes you think. Advertising controls the narrative. The media controls the narrative. Why do people buy things that they don't need? Because advertising controls the narrative. They convince you you're not a human being. You're a consumer. And frankly, they laugh at you. These people laugh at you. They not only rob you, but then they laugh at you. And we're in prison because we don't know who we are. You know, you go to any church in America, go in the back on any given day during the week, daily communicants, simple people, the poor lady who might work cleaning houses. They live simple lives. They're happy. They don't have all the gadgets. You don't need these things. We are we buy into a lie because we don't know who we are.
Also, now, many of you know that one of the people that we listen to a lot and we've interviewed a couple of times is E. Michael Jones. There's a reason for this too. And this goes to where much of this is the culture war. But the culture war is in the context of a larger war, which is the spiritual war. How is it that, see, like you make a good point. People don't know who they are. Like I would say to people when they say, well, advertising, you're a victim of advertising. I'm a victim of advertising. So we're all a victim of advertising. Here's the difference. We know it. All of you and us, we know it. The rest of the population, they think that they're actually making a consumer choice. I'm making a consumer choice. I'm buying Pepsi instead of Coca-Cola or whatever the case might be. No, you're an animal and they treat you like an animal. Now, we're not saying you're animals, but the advertising industry is notorious for this. E. Michael Jones makes the argument that we don't use our reason because of all the other factors that the left has imposed on us, like pornography, which should not be considered protected speech under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. It should not. When you destroy a person's ability for their reason to control their passions, what do you get? It's not just, this doesn't pertain to just the sexual arena, okay? It goes to advertising. It's called impulse buying. See, if you can't control your impulses, what do? You see a commercial for a Cadillac, you got 30 G's that's burning a hole in your bank account, and you're like, oh, I love that Cadillac. Yeah, but the Cadillac costs $45,000. You know what I mean? But they turn you into an impulse buyer, and they know how to pull those strings. I think the larger question, the reason why I'm bringing it up, you ask, who are we? Or you say we don't know who we are. I think the question that you could ask in a more pointed way is, are you a human being with reason and intelligence, able to make a free choice, or are you an animal who's going to be led around the nose by the government, advertising, big tech, and big Hollywood? That's my question, because it seems to me a lot of people are acting like animals, Joe.
Well, I guess I when I say they don't know who they are, they basically don't have self-worth. If you know you're a child of God, you don't need the newest phone. You don't need a fancy car, and you don't need a fancy house to know who you are. Most Americans, their life isn't grounded in that. And that's why they're controlled. You see, they miss it. They miss it. When you prioritize things correctly, a lot of things fall off. Like, you don't need this. You don't need that. You don't need this. But people aren't driven by that. Americans aren't driven by that. They're driven by, what does the guy have next door, and I have to up him. And ultimately, you're arguing over nothing. It's
right.
Dust. It's dust.
What's the old saying? What's the old saying? Here, one of those things they've drumbeat into our heads particularly over the last 100 years, since we've become a more consumer society. Got to keep up with the Joneses. What an empty way to live your life.
Well, that's
I gotta keep. In fact, there's a commandment against that. Thou shalt not covet. All right, 2 commandments. Am I right? Your neighbor's wife and your neighbor's goods. But you got to keep up with the. See, that's America for you. That's our ethos. Problem. Is, well, I got to keep up with the Joneses. Why? You drive, let's say, for argument's sake, a GMC. Why do you have to go out and buy a Cadillac? Do you have to go out and buy a Mercedes? You have to go out and buy everything. And this speaks to our original point. We allow Coca-Cola and the rest of them to take advantage of us in this way without using our reason and without using our God-given intelligence and making a free choice. Say, you know what? I'm not going to do that. And it might require sacrifice, which is always Joe's larger point. We're so, it seems, unwilling to sacrifice in this country. So unwilling.
Something to think about, because ultimately these are the people that they hate you. I got news for you. They hate you. Why should you give them a dime?
What did Aquinas say? In other words, what is love? Willing the good of the other, not expecting anything in return. That's love, because that's what God does for us. Okay, God wills us, wills our good, like we're supposed to will the good of the other. Okay, not expecting anything in return. That's love. That's selflessness. Okay, these people, you are a means to an end. See, according to Aquinas, you are an end in and of yourself, because you have infinite worth in the eyes of God. Okay. According to these people, you are a means to an end. And what's the end? Their pocketbook, their bank account, their political influence, their political power. Now, I don't know about you. Well, I do know about all you guys who are watching us right now at the front line with Joe and Joe. You guys have your head on straight. Many people out there, if they got that through their head, and they started to, because who knowingly wants to be used, Joe Resinello? Would you knowingly want to be used?
But no, but people do it. I mean, and they are using you. They hate you, and you let them. I'll be honest, and you become a slave. Debt is slavery. And frankly, you just don't need some of these things. Talk to people who have control of their life. I'm telling you, you don't need certain things. Do you know I'm 50 years old? I don't have a cell phone. Never had one. Never, ever had a cell phone. I'm a professional person. I work in New York City. I don't have a cell phone. I don't need it. You know what I say to people when they say you don't have a cell phone? You know what I say? I'm not that important. I don't need a phone. I sit in front of a phone all day. If you want to call me, call me. I have a computer. Send me an email. I check it when I come home. I'll get in touch with you. The only time I don't have to call you is when I'm in a commute and I'm not that important. How much do you spend on your phone? How much did it cost you? $700?
More than that.
How much does it cost you every month? I'm just using that as an example. That's money in the bank. But people are governed by this idea that I have to have that or I'm not a human being.
Right.
And frankly, that means you are a slave. Simply put, we as Americans are driven by these ideas. These people hate you, by the way. They hate you.
And well, we need to get
they
that.
rob you.
Well, that's the thing. They hate you. But this is why this conversation could go on for a long time. Joe's exactly right. By the way, William, in the chat room,
Thank
$20. Thank you, brother. We really appreciate it. So all of you out there, your prayers, your support, we're doing so well. Thanks to you. And we don't say that in a braggy way. We say that because we feel like we're doing something and we're seeing the good fruit of it. And it's because of all you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you in particular, William. Is that why don't people why can't we just, you know what, from every show from now on, Joe Rossinello, we're just going to hammer that home. Corporate America hates you. Stop giving them your money. Do you know that if you, now I forgot if you mentioned it earlier when it came to the first topic with McConnell or Rand Paul. We need to start looking at parallel economies. Now, are they parallel? Not necessarily. What that just means is we make consumer choices to start, let's say, supporting local businesses. Yes, this is an important point before we leave this conversation. I'd love to know what you're thinking. This is not an original thought on our part, but we're echoing something somebody else had. We have to get rid of this idea that libertarians and conservatives have convinced us that the government can't do anything. That's not true. I used to think it was true. So I'm not saying that I don't at least on some level sympathize with that. I don't want the government to do much. But if government's not going to do something about big tech, then what the hell do you need government for? If the government's not going to protect our right to speak freely on these, what Clarence Thomas, because that's what he said, Clarence Thomas is basically calling them utilities. He's basically calling them utilities. Alexander Graham Bell didn't invent the phone and then turn around and say, well, I'm going to tell you what to say over the phone. No, if I'm on the phone, I can say what I want unless I'm committing a crime. Okay, so big tech should operate the same way because they become a common carrier. Since when, please answer this for me, since when is it that the government can't do anything, particularly when the actions that they're taking in corporate America take away my rights, our rights? Why is that?
Well, I'll be honest with you. They control the narrative. And to be honest, they think you are committing a crime by saying certain things. These people, this is where this society has become twisted. They actually believe, they're sincere that you are committing and I am committing a crime. If I say, I believe in traditional marriage.
That's right.
I am committing a crime.
If it's not codified yet, it will be soon.
And this is what I'm saying. This is where we've arrived because we don't have a rudder anymore in the water. You see, this is why I'll be honest with you. We've gotten to a point, I don't know how it's going to get fixed. Truthfully, if you ask me, I think society is going to collapse and then it will build from the ashes. I don't think we can turn back any longer outside of a miracle. I don't. I'm sorry.
But a miracle can occur. And again, people say, well, what is the Blessed Virgin Mary going to appear in the sky? Well, she did to St. Juan Diego, and she can. But how about this, which is also a function of God's grace, okay? Whatever form it takes, when this country wakes up from the sleep that they're in, this sleep that is both self-induced because we've become so comfortable and so rich, even the poorest, or not the poorest, but even the poor, when you compare poor people in America to poor people in Calcutta, or those little babies in Africa that have flies all over swarming around their head, that's a poor person. We become so comfortable in this country that so it's self-imposed, and then we become indifferent because that's what the culture tells us. That's what Hollywood tells us. We do need, I guess, a raising of our conscience, of our consciousness, an illumination of conscience. I know a lot of Catholics talk about the illumination of conscience, and that will be a function of God's grace, where in whatever form God wants to take it, where he'll wake us up out of this slumber. Maybe he's using people like Joe and I. We like to think and we pray that he is. Okay? We're saying things that most people we think should say. Either people agree with that or they don't. But that could be the way it takes. I agree with you, by the way. I want to go on record to say I completely agree. It's going to come as a shocker with Joe Resinello. It is so dense, this web that they've spun. It's like you're the human mind. No matter how much we could calculate things, the human mind can't see your way through this. We're going to need some divine intervention. But it starts, Joe, with people raising their consciousness to say, you know what, I'm not going to be bullied anymore. I know this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, and I'm going to start acting that way.
I hope for the best. That's why I don't think it's going to ever be a political solution, because I don't think the solution is political. We don't have a rudder in the road anymore. The country has changed. It's not guided by principles. You know, it simply isn't. Well, I mean, we're going off the track. I mean, obviously, we have to do our best. Obviously, I have to speak the truth. Obviously, we have to pray and fast for America, and do our best to give a good example, to set the tone. But ultimately, listen, you know, if it's not built on God, it doesn't last. And frankly, this country is not built on God.
So if you want to last,
that's just the way it works.
Let's finish up this conversation, and then we're going to move on. I did want to make one point, because it's a factual point. It's a point of data and information that we want to make sure all of you know. This is according to Rand Paul. Okay. This is a quote. They have already gotten rid of the All-Star game and the draft, and they're doing it because they don't like a Republican law, a law that actually expands voting. Please remember that when your friends try to call it racist, what Georgia did. It expands voting. It does not contract voting. Georgia now has more early voting than New York has, so it's kind of ridiculous. That's just a point of information for everybody to know. So Rand Paul's larger point is Georgia versus Coca-Cola, the Major League Baseball, and Delta. If they want to boycott us, why don't we boycott them? And that's what we should do.
100% agree.
And you're at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello, and now we're way in the breach, and we're half angry. We're still pleasant, and we're always joyful, but we're a little angry now because we need to start waking up in this country. Be a steward of the money that you go out and earn. You earn it. They didn't earn it. They're just trying to take it from you. You went out and you earned it. So you should monitor where we should all monitor where we are spending our money. Trust me. At least in certain ways. Ultimately, we're not going to change completely without God, but at least we could start tearing away at their armor a little bit by starting to cost them some money.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to go to a little political discussion here. Democratic, what's it called? Senator from Arizona, Kristen Sinema. She basically defends the filibuster. Basically, it's surfaced as she's not the only Democrat, by the way, because she was joined by Joe Manchin of West Virginia, and they blocked the eliminating of the filibuster, as well as the infrastructure proposal. Right. I think it's $2.25 trillion. So even within the Democratic Party, there is pushback. And they're not having it. Something also to keep in mind, there's been a number of bills that have passed in the House, and they're on Charles Schumer's desk right now. Those bills are voting right bills, in case you haven't been paying attention, immigration bills, and also gun control bills. He hasn't put them to a vote. They have control of the Senate, even though it's a tie. As we all know, the vice president is the tiebreaker. So they do have control. Why? Because within their ranks, we just mentioned Sinema, we just mentioned Joe Manchin, they're not on board. Why? Because the left has overplayed their hand.
Can I throw in one thing? And you please keep going. But there's also, this might come as a shock, there's also about 6 or 7 Democrats that are opposed to raising the corporate tax back to 28%. In fact, Trump lowered it from above 28%. Biden and his regime, the Politburo, they're looking to raise the corporate tax back to 20 or to 28%. There's about 6 Democrats that are opposed to that.
Why?
Because they're not insane.
Why? Because ultimately that creates job loss. You see, we've said this on other shows. I work in a corporation. The man never takes the hit. They pass it on to you.
You do.
It's like insurance. The medical insurance argument. The pharmaceutical people argue with the doctors. The doctors argue with the hospitals. What happens? They pass on the bill to you. It's the way it works. You raise, it's always couched, oh, we're taxing big business, the rich. they're not getting taxed. They're firing people. They're firing people. And ultimately, a lot of these states are going to leave certain states that overburden them with tax. For instance, New York is supposedly raising corporate taxes. Jamie Dimon just came out. He's the CEO of Chase, JP Morgan Chase. He basically is like, listen, I only need 60% of my staff in the office at any given time. He's basically shooting a bullet across the bow. He doesn't even have to be in New York. He could pull out of New York and say, I'm moving to Nashville, Tennessee.
But here's the nefarious part. That's why the globalists, and we're not going to cover this story, but it's part of what we're talking about. That's why the globalists want to now have a global 35% corporate tax. So the Jamie Dimon, now he's no hero of the front line with Joe and Joe.
No way.
Jamie Dimon's a dirtbag, okay? Straight up. I don't care what anybody says. But the bottom line is this. They want to make it where if you're a corporation and you think you're going to go to another state or 2 states over or 8 states over, okay, they're going to charge you 35% too. They want a global 35% corporate income tax.
But then we're not, it's not, United States.
Well, this is global. No, these is like Angela Merkel and people like that. But obviously, that would pertain all these globalist organizations.
Tell Angela Merkel to stay in Germany,
right? But that's the whole point of globalism is that
screw yourself.
You're a guy that would say that, and a lot of us would because we like the idea of states. Tomorrow on the Crusade Channel, we're going to be talking about the United States. A lot of our things, a lot of the ways we can start to change things in this country is to start working on the state and local level. Okay, but why do you think the globalists hate it? Why do you think Obama never referred to us as the United States of America? It was always America because it tells you, so you got to listen to language. He didn't use the words United States because he didn't like the idea of the United States. If it was up to people like him in the Democrat Party, they would do away with states and have a central government that tells us all what to do. So Jamie Dimon will not be able to leave New York and let's say go to Florida or Texas. Okay, or whatever the case might be.
But that keeps people accountable. You see, that's the beauty of federalism. It keeps people accountable. If New York doesn't do their jobs right, meaning govern, you leave. Bye. Don't have to be here. The broadband, the one thing COVID taught America is you don't have to work in an office anymore. Don't have to do it.
Not necessary.
So these people, if you ask me, don't have the leverage that they once had. And frankly, if you're going to overburden these corporations, particularly states, they're going to leave. They're going to leave your state. Look what Shapiro did in California. He left. What's it called? What's his outfit?
Ben Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro. What's the outfit?
Daily Caller.
Yeah.
Daily Caller.
Daily Wire, right?
Whichever. It's one of the two.
Like it's a conservative media company. He left. He went to Tennessee.
Right.
You don't have to be here anymore. It's just the way it is. And frankly, whenever they raise the corporate tax, they always couch it like, oh, we're taxing the rich, we're taxing the big shots. No, you're not. You're basically costing people jobs. And there are a lot of people who just make a living.
Do you know what happens on my job if they raise the corporate income tax? Okay, the corporate tax. Okay, my boss goes back to paying, well, it would be 28%. Okay. A lot of the people that work in my job will lose their job because they're going to save money on the hourly. And everybody who does have to go to work, okay, is now going to get at least a half of another person's workload put on them. That's exactly what's going to happen. That's what happens. Because, see, when you keep the corporate rate low, they say, well, we got two guys two guys or gals doing the job of 2 people. When the corporate rate goes up, like Joe says, the man's always going to get paid. Turns around and says, well, guess what? We got 3 people there. 2 people can do the job of the 3 people. Let's get rid of 1. And those 2 people that are left over, they're going to have to pick up the slack. And if they don't like it, they could go too.
Correct. Because that's what they do. The job. And it's like the minimum wage deal, moving it to $15 an hour. All that does is it impacts the poor because they will be laid off. You have to have real growth to do these things. It's basic economics. But sadly, the Democrats don't know how to govern. Everything they touch is a disaster.
They know how to win.
They do.
But they don't know how to govern.
They don't.
The Republicans actually know how to govern, but they don't have the stones
to win,
to actually do. Like think about 2010, overwhelming majorities in the House and Senate. Paul Ryan didn't do anything. They had a golden opportunity to repeal Obamacare, right? They just didn't have the will to do it. They let the left create the narrative, then control the narrative, and then they let them bully. Somebody in the chat room mentioned bullying earlier on. That's what they do. Then they turn around and they bully you into submission. That's what we don't need any. Did you watch DeSantis, by the way? And we're going to cover that tomorrow. Okay,
60 minutes.
No, about the 60-minute thing. Now that guy's got some stones, and that's what we need more of. But Republicans do not know what to do when we give them power. That's why we have to make sure in the next election we vet these people properly. Because if you're going to tell me that supposedly, okay, in 2022 the Republicans are going to win the House and win the Senate. We'll see. Okay, let's see if there's election reform at the state level. Georgia's trying it, but of course they're racist for doing so. Let's see. Let's say that happens. Are we going to vote in Mitt Romney's and Jeff Flake's and people like that? Is that what we're going to do? I hope not, because then we're just going to be back in the same boat that we are.
It's sad.
And as far as Kristen Sinema is concerned, let's get it straight about the filibuster. At least sense, and maybe she should tell her Democratic colleagues, say, look, regardless of what you think of the election, historically speaking, they should lose both majorities in 2022.
Oh my God.
Just historically speaking. Now, given what Biden and Kamala and the Politburo is doing in Washington, they probably are in store, if everything is above board, they probably are in store for a drubbing. Okay. And Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin both know you do away with the filibuster now and you turn around and you try to ram this stuff through. Well, then there's no more filibuster. That means in about a year and a half, when the Republicans are in control, you know what? Number one, they're going to undo everything you just did. All right. In the last 18 months. Okay. They're going to undo everything. And now there's no filibuster in their way for them to do what they want to do. So at least they're smart enough to know that.
Actually, I think William nails it on the head. He said they fear the media. I think you're right.
Who, the Republicans?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, yes.
The media is out of control, and they control the narrative. They control the masses. And that is exactly right. That is exactly right. The media is so out of control. We're going to cover that story of DeSantis on the Crusade channel. And it's funny. When I read it, you know what his mistake was? I wouldn't have went on. You see, I'll be honest with you.
Oh, you're talking about with 60 Minutes.
60 Minutes.
Just stay away from them.
That's what we have. Like,
there's a boycott for you. Boycott them.
I used to say this, like when Trump was the president, why do you have a press conference? Listen, you're not going to cover this correctly, even if I say the right thing. So guess what? I'm not engaging with you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it is. That is the way it is. When I'm not engaging with you, just like the president wouldn't engage with me. Like, I'm not invited to that press conference. I'm not inviting you because they are the enemy of the American people.
And they couldn't stand when he said that. They went so completely 5-year-old.
That was like, what's his face on Fox, who actually thinks.
Chris Wallace.
He actually seriously thinks he's a serious journalist, which is a comedy. And they are the enemy of the American people. So I'm not even going to have the conversation with you. We're not having press conferences.
That's it.
Anymore.
Boycott them. Think of it this way, Governor DeSantis. You put money in 60 Minutes pocket.
Don't give them a dime. Don't show up.
Don't show up. Don't go on.
That was his mistake.
All you Republicans, get it through your head, especially in the House and the Senate. Don't go on CNN. Don't worry about the people that are watching CNN. They don't like you anyway. Don't go on CNN. Don't go on MSNBC. Don't go on their talk shows. Don't go on their radio shows. Don't go. And they say, well, no, but we want another. No, you don't want another point of view. You're not going to cover me fairly.
Exactly.
So guess what? Here's a line that Joe and I love to use all the time. What Republicans should say to the media is, screw you, creepo.
I'm not going.
Screw you, creepo. We're not coming on your show.
And like I said, because you don't cover me fairly. We're not having the conversation. And when you start doing your job right, then you're invited back.
Exactly.
And I'm not talking about, what's it called? You can cover me critically. It's not about that. But you see, it's not about critical
But what
coverage.
they did to
It's
DeSantis.
propaganda and garbage. And again, the press is garbage. It's garbage. There's nothing, frankly, in the mainstream media. That's Fox too. Garbage.
Yeah,
It's garbage.
I want to make one parallel with you to what we were talking about earlier about boycotts. Okay, when you look at, let's say, what we could do as far as boycotts are concerned, and not for nothing, if we ever got together and hopefully Joe and Joe can be some sort of an influence in this, okay, where we could come up with lists of companies we just do not do business with and let them know it. The other thing would be to start, and one thing that I hope happens with DeSantis, I hope he sues 60 Minutes and takes them to the cleaners. We won't get into it tonight because we have other things that we want to cover, but I will say this. There is a precedent, a Supreme Court precedent. It's the New York Times versus Sullivan, okay, which sets the standard for what the press, the media could say about a public official. That is the standard that needs to be challenged, because under that standard, they get away with murder. And a guy like DeSantis is in a perfect position to sue the crap out of CBS and say, well, you know what? I'm not doing this for the money, but I'm going to take them all the way. I'm going to take them all the way. We're going to change that precedent, okay? Because all you have to do is have one successful lawsuit. I was hoping it was going to be Nick Sandmann, okay? But his family settled. God bless them. They probably offered a bunch of cash, and they're middle-class people, and they probably took the money. Fine. But a guy like DeSantis is going to be around for a long time. He ain't going to the poorhouse. He can make a significant impact. If he files a suit against 60 Minutes, the same way we need to boycott corporations, when it comes to the media, when they call somebody a racist, sue them. When they blatantly lie like they did about DeSantis in the 60 Minutes piece, sue them. If they lose one of those cases and have to pay significantly, and that standard changes, then they'll stop. Because again, what are they driven by? Money.
And that's
and ideology, you agree. But money. If you cost them that kind of money, you know what? Then they won't be able to peddle their propaganda because they won't have a platform, because they'll be broke. And that's the power that we have that we don't use.
This is a great article. This was Michael Vallejos in the American Conservative. He breaks down basically the elites. He calls it the doom of the elite. I just want to give you a few excerpts from it. I thought it was brilliant. This is what he had to say. He said, leadership becomes aristocracy. The authority to govern becomes the right to rule. Law giving becomes law enforcement. Duty to defend becomes license to oppress. He goes on, he says, first there is a founder generation, the leadership architects. They are succeeded by a builder generation, extending the leadership franchise. After them come the renewers, hoping to rekindle the founders, often their own father's vision. Hence, the first three generations are guided by the memories of a heroic past. Now things get worse. Pay attention to this. Yet overreach by the renewers often leads to a manager generation.
And we don't need more managers.
That seeks to consolidate the paradigm. Their goal is to shore up the status quo. They're followed by the born to rule lifestyle generation, who have lost the original leadership calling and who no longer feel the weight of the obligation. And that is where we are in America.
I think he's right, because if
spot on. Thank you, Colin.
Yes, Colin, $20. Thank you, brother. Really appreciate it. God bless you. So this like you said, this is really good, because too many times, look, none of us have the time to go back to college, and God forbid, because you're not really learning much in college nowadays. But we do take the time to learn, and we learn by reading, and we do also learn by exposing writers and thinkers to other people. And maybe they'll go out and, let's say, they'll buy their books or read their articles in places, really good publications like Crisis Magazine, and things like that. So what's good about Michael Vallejos' article here is he's looking at, let's say, a typical, civilization in history. And he's breaking it down. And you want to know what? I read it and I'm saying to myself, look, I don't know everything about history. I'm pretty good with history. He just described the Roman Empire.
It's human nature.
He just described exactly.
It's human nature.
But what is also in human nature, and something that we do have inside of us, is we have the ability to, let's say, because we have history as a guide, which I wish we would use history as a guide, we could see these things coming, and we try to. We try to in America. I mean, one of the reasons why we do the show, one of the things we're fighting against is Marxism, because we don't need to know what Marxism would look like in America, because we have an abundant example over the last 100 years what Marxism has done. Again, we could use our reason, but sometimes people need to be reminded, or even just enlightened, let's say, to what the arc of a civilization is. And Michael Vallejos is putting it in the context of the elites, those who rule. Look at Rome. I'm not going to get long-winded, but look at Rome. Rome lasted 1,000 years. Rome went through this exact arc he's talking about. This exact arc he's talking about. You had founders, then you had renewers or builders, Going back to 500-600 BC, you had the founders. They were founded on principle, okay, on certain founding principles. Then you had those that built the society on that. Then you had those who renewed the society on that. And Rome was doing really well for about 400 or 500 years. And then what happened? The elites came in. When you look at, let's say, for 100 years before Julius Caesar, you had the Gracchi, you had others. They had a civil war. What was the civil war in Rome? That was a war amongst elites. That's what who was going to have the most power, right? Now you get into managers. What happens over the course of the next 100 years? And then it ends with the emperors, with Augustus. But before that, Julius Caesar. You start to get the managers. They're the elitists. They're going to manage everything. And then over the course of time, it's like you mentioned, it's like Michael Vallejos mentioned, then eventually they feel like they have a natural right to lead. They're born to lead. And what happens then? Then they actually begin to deify themselves.
Well, it's
and that's what they're doing now. That's my point, Joe.
It's a good point. And it's also, when I read the article, it reminded me of Animal Farm. Basically, you have, certain animals are entitled to more benefits than others. And that's what you see in that book. That's why you read it in high school. It's to teach you something. But, he mentioned Rome. I think of Israel. Like we're talking biblical Israel. You had Israel divided. You had Israel and Judah. Israel, I believe it was the northern kingdom, allowed their culture to be defiled. It became defiled by pagan beliefs. It collapsed. Judah lasted 200 years longer because it stayed true to the law of God. You see, all of these things that we just read, it's human nature. This is human nature. You see, that's why a civilization has to be grounded by a guiding principle. And a guiding principle out of my mouth isn't a principle. It has to be grounded in the grace of God. You see, God elevates our nature and helps us to work past these things. You see, that's why this is important. It's important. And we have become so full of ourselves as a country, because we're rich and we're comfortable, that we have forgotten that. And the society is collapsing because we're human. And humans are greedy and humans want power. And that is exactly what we're seeing. You see, a society grounded in God wants equity for all. For all. And that's for homosexuals. You say, oh, you're not giving them equity. Absolutely. They are entitled to every right that I have as a single human being. Every right and respect. Same with someone who chooses to be a transgender person. Every right and respect as a human being. I don't agree with your choice. But when we don't have that, and that's why this is happening, and that's what happened in Judah, it lasted longer. That's what happened in Rome, and that is what's happening now.
And think of it this way: when you again, I love Roman history. I know a lot about it. I'm not an expert. Okay, I haven't read Gibbon or anything like that, but I know enough about Roman history. If you want to I'm going to give people an example. This is an example of what we're talking about because this is what we're going through. That's why we're having this conversation. The title of this argument of this article is "The Doom of the Elites." They're doomed. See, we're not doomed. Because we are smart enough to know what's going on. Again, we've read history. We are not doomed to repeat history because we could do something about it as long as we stand. Remember the motto for National Review? When National Review was first founded, okay? You want to talk about founding principles? The founding principle of National Review was, we are standing athwart history yelling, stop. That was the founding principle of National Review, okay? And that's exactly right. See, the conservative mind says, we got it. We studied the ancient civilizations. We studied Rome. We studied Greece. We studied the British Empire. We studied it all. And when we see something coming down the pike now, we could do something about it. I want to just give an example, concrete example, about what happens in this arc. You remember, we all know the city in Ohio, Cincinnati, right? So Cincinnati is, and there's a statue there of Cincinnatus, okay? Cincinnatus, early on in the Roman Republic, okay? He was what you would consider an elite, okay? But times were good. It was peaceful. He was on his farm. He was plowing his fields. He was living a simple life, okay? And he was an elite. I believe he was a general at some point, and he won battles for the Roman Republic to help consolidate Italy. There was an attack. They needed help, okay? And they called on Cincinnatus, who put down his plow. Again, some of it's mythology, but it's enough history there. And he put down his plow, and he went out, and they gave him all the power he needed, to go out and fight and win the battle that they needed to win. I forgot if it was against one of the Italian tribes, either the Aqui or the Nervi or one of them. He beat them. They offered him power for life. He said, I'm going back to my farm. That is the difference, because if you fast forward from him 500 years later, you know what you end up with when you talk about the elites? Caligula and Nero and people like that. That's the arc of the elites. In other words, when you have a society of Cincinnatuses, okay, you have a society that adheres to founding principles, okay, as you mentioned about Israel, okay? You depart from God's law, which is obviously the founding principle of Israel, okay? This is what happens. We have enough to know that we don't have to allow it to happen, is my larger point.
But you think about I'm reading the 4 books of
Tom Gugliotta. Real quick, Tom Gugliotta's just got to be an Italian wise guy. He says Cincinnatus Bengalis. Okay, thanks, Tom.
I'm reading the Lord of the Rings, the 4 books, and why is it though? Like in that like journey for the ring, it's about power, right? They give it to the little hobbit, and the man tries to steal it from him because it overwhelms him. You see, that's everything Joe said. You see, that's a rare person to do that. You see, Christ was tempted in the desert, right? He said, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world. You know, think about that for a second, that temptation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, temptation. Think about how many people go to Hollywood and don't get chewed alive by it. Think about it.
Yeah.
People go there, they become famous, they become rich, they destroy their lives. Many of them, if not all of them, they're married 4 or 5 times, they get caught up in drugs, alcohol. Why is that? Because temptation is real, and we are made of flesh, and we're human. And that's going to that basic narrative. That type of action of a Cincinnatus is very rare. When you dangle the ring, even in front of somebody who is noble, it's very easy to be swayed. You see, that's where grace comes in. That's the need for God in a society. That's why America thrived. It's not thriving anymore because we have thrown him out. Whether you like to hear that or not, that's just true. And that's why this battle is spiritual and it's not political. And until we get that right, we're not going to get right.
And Joe makes a good point. It is spiritual. We talk about things like boycotting and stuff like that because obviously the spiritual battle, excuse me, manifests itself in how the economy operates, what we allow the elites to do, or how the government operates, how the culture is operating. That's how the spiritual battle, the evil, all right, the evil one and the evil people that he has control of, that's how they manifest their evil in the larger society. So those things, of course, are to be fought against, okay? But ultimately, Joe's right. But if you ask for the grace, look at, like, I know this is going to be not unpopular here, okay? But look at somebody like General Francisco Franco, okay, who was Catholic, okay, who defeated the communists in Spain. Franco gave power back. Franco didn't keep power like Stalin did till he got on his deathbed, okay, or Khrushchev until he died, okay, and others, or like Castro, okay. Now he was a fascist, okay, and I'm not going to argue about the merits of fascism, but Francisco Franco gave the power back to the government. He did not retain the power for himself. You know, like you just mentioned about temptation. The temptation is once you win the battle, especially in a civil war, you keep the power. He gave it back. Over time, he gave that power back. Can I make one larger point?
Sure.
Because I know you want to move on. But here's the parallel that Vlahos makes after World War II in America. So go ahead. I want you to go through it.
Basically, he says, here are the 5 dynamics.
Now, see if this doesn't ring true to you. Again, this is not, we're quoting, Mr. Vlahos here, an American conservative, but this does seem to ring true.
He says, here's the 5 dynamics that have taken the United States from elite leadership in World War II to elite betrayal today. Elites will always seek to grow their status and wealth.
Check.
Elites become disconnected from the people they once led.
Check.
Elites come to believe that they have become the nation itself.
That's the whole reason for the front line with Joe and Joe. Go ahead.
The elite solution makes things worse, sometimes by design. We saw that last summer. And that's liberalism in a nutshell. And elites can never see how their path leads to fail.
And that's because of pride. That's because
Great
of
article.
pride. It's a great article. It's in the American Conservative, The Doom of the Elite. We just took out a few of the salient points. We suggest you go read it. You're at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Rossinello. And we're way in the breach, okay? And we have one final story, right, Joe?
Yep.
All right, because there is a new coalition in this country. I hope Republicans get it through their head. McConnell seems to recognize it to a certain degree. The country club Republicans and big business and the social conservative, those days are over. I don't want any more Mitt Romneys. I don't want any more Jeff Flakes. I don't want any more people like that. Talk about elites. I don't want those elites. Okay, just because they're rich means that somehow they're entitled to be a senator or a congressman. We don't want them anymore. That coalition's dead. Okay, we want an economy that is going to serve the common good. Okay, while we maintain our free enterprise system, that's going to serve more of the common good than certainly it is right now, because this is not the free enterprise system that we have. This is a crony capitalist system that's designed to do one thing: keep those same elites in power and awash with cash. And again, who does it come at the expense of? Workers. Go ahead, Joe.
Joe Biden.
This is from Mr. Working Class himself. So so we're all clear about this, all those people in Pennsylvania and all those blue-collar guys that voted for Biden because your grandfather did and your father did, this is what Joe Biden is doing to you.
Joe Binder wrote this article, and it's about Joe Biden's unlawful inflating of the U.S. labor market with foreign workers. Now, Biden last month announced that his administration would not seek to eliminate the regulation allowing H-4 visa holders to take U.S. jobs after lobbying from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and other corporate interests. I'm going to break down the stats for you. The H-1B visa program allows companies to bring 85,000 foreign workers to take U.S. jobs each year. And also in universities as well as nonprofits, there is no cap. So that's probably a lot higher. And there are about 650,000 H-1B visa foreign workers in the United States at any given moment. Many Americans wind up training these people and then they take their jobs. Now, please don't misunderstand me that I am not for foreigners. That's not true. But I am for Americans. And this is something that corporations like, and it hurts Americans. And it goes to show you how Joe Biden is in their pocket to a degree. To a degree. He does want to tax them, which is also going to hurt you too, by the way.
Real quick, what's the trade-off? Listen, guys, here's Biden. Come on, man. Come on. I'm gonna go out there and we're gonna raise the tax on you, but I'm gonna let you bring in all the cheap labor you want. So at the end of the day, it's gonna be a wash for you. Who's the victim? All you Frontline with Joe and Joe listeners. What have you been saying this whole show? Who's the victim? You, the American worker. If I raise your taxes by 7%, but then I allow you to go out because of foreign visas and let's say work permits, I allow you to go out and pay somebody 25, 30% less than you would have to pay an American. You look at the numbers and say, well, Joe, let's say it was President Pasillo, okay? No, you look at me and say, hey, President Pasillo, that's a wash. Okay, raise my taxes, but make sure I can get that cheap labor. Who did Joe Rossinello just mention that lobbied for this? Chamber of Commerce. Last time I checked, the Chamber of Commerce calls themselves conservative. Don't think conservatives and libertarians are your friends. We keep saying that all the time. They'll sell you down the river in a second. Corporate profits are their god.
It's about money.
Corporate profits and corporate growth. And that means if you got to go get cheap labor from India, well, you could pay that Indian kid $75,000 a year, where in America, you're going to have to pay that educated American worker $100,000 or $110,000 a year. So Joe Biden, they'll tell him, go ahead, raise the taxes. Just make sure I get those visas. Again, who's paying for it? You are. We are. We're paying for it. It's disgusting. It's disgusting that any blue-collar person in America, Biden's already cost you your job. He did that on day one with Keystone, and he did that with fracking. How many hundreds of thousands of jobs?
And how he lied straight-faced to you.
Right. And then gets out there and goes, come on, man, I didn't lie.
And then the press gives him a buy. This is the fix. I'm going to be honest with you. This is why the country, if you ask me, outside of a miracle, is finished. I wish I thought differently. I don't see it. I don't see a way out of it. The elites have cemented their position. And here's another thing, not for nothing, because you look at history, even take an extreme. There's a war and you slit their throat. In 100 years, they'll slit your throat.
Right. That doesn't change
change anything. Ultimately, that's why it's a spiritual battle. And frankly, though, people don't listen to God's voice. People in my family don't listen to God's voice. My friends don't listen to God's voice. And in some respects, I don't listen to God's voice. What will change? What will change? The society will crumble. And from the ashes of society, something else will grow. That's what's happened. It's the arc of man. And again, without God and without grace, that happens sooner than later.
Christy's you're right. Christy's in the chat room. Hi, Christy. And all you guys out there, we see you all. We love you all. We see you go. This has been a very good conversation. Colin's out there. Dave the Hermit's out there. Christy's in the chat room. She said, come on, Joe. God's got this. Have faith. Christy, thank you for saying it. All right. We love you. We have faith. That's not the issue. The issue is, I was going to piggyback off of what Joe said, and this could speak to your point, okay, is that instead of looking at things in dollars and cents in America, which in many ways even the middle class does, and a lot of it's always dollars and cents. If we start looking at things as right and wrong, that's a step on the path of inviting God back into our society, because we recognize justice from injustice, right from wrong, good from evil, instead of dollars and cents all the time. If people would just, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing this. We're trying to help and aid in the raising of the American consciousness. Why? Because we're geniuses? No, but we see the difference between what is right and what is wrong. Look at the numbers Joe just read you. That Mr. Working Class is willing to sacrifice over 750,000 jobs or more because he's in bed with China and he's in bed with the Chamber of Commerce and doesn't pluck a hair for the American working man. And we got to sit here and we got to hear about how Donald Trump is the worst guy ever to sit in the Oval Office. He brought jobs back. Even if you want to leave aside anything else and just talk about economics, at least he brought jobs back. At least he said, listen, I'm worried about these guys out in the Midwest. They're not making any money. They need jobs. And then Mr. I'm going to unite the country. This is how you're uniting the country.
Well, it's business as usual.
Pretty much.
That's what it is. It's just business as usual. And I guess the press gives them a pass. And frankly, people aren't, to be honest with you, they're not educated when they vote. And they vote with their passions, and they vote, frankly, on the surface, on things that don't matter. And this is where we're at. And that's why, I mean, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I do see clearly what's going on. Here's the deal. I mean, Donald Trump wasn't God, and Donald Trump was flawed.
Seriously.
As a man. Donald Trump was abrasive, but Donald Trump's policies, not all of them, but many of them were successful. They were. And Joe Biden has not even been in the office for 6 months, and his policies are crumbling.
It's a disaster.
He's
a disaster.
So, I mean, you tell a tree by the fruit it bears.
Right.
And here's the thing. And this is what happened when Romney debated Obama. 47% of America will vote Democrat if Ronald McDonald is the candidate. If Grimace is the candidate.
The Cookie Monster
should be the candidate. But this is the truth. And this is where I just say to myself, how do you overcome this?
We overcome it. We overcome it by, number one, there's a few keys that have to happen. And then I want to address Michelle's in the chat room and just give her some information. The first way to overcome this is to assert your First Amendment right to speak freely. And that means we need to implore the government, our elected officials, both on the state level and the federal level, to put the check on big tech. And because we know the media is gone, but on social media, we need to be able to get our message out, and they can't censor us. That if they censor speech that's protected, let's say in Joe and my case, under the state constitution of the state of New Jersey, if they censor that speech, they're going to be held to account and they're going to be sued, or they're going to be penalized. That's just one possible solution, but big tech needs to be pushed back. Part of the solution is that we have to assume, in all fairness, a lot of people, because of what's going on, a lot of people just don't know what's happening. We encounter that, Joe. We encounter that in the chat room. People say, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know. I find it at work all the time. People say, I wasn't aware of that. Okay. No, but if you tell them, and more importantly, if you tell them where they can go find out that what you're saying is true, okay, that people will start to listen. So I will say, in fairness, a lot of people are just, quite frankly, in the dark. That's part of the design. In other words, of the left and the elite is to make it that way. But to keep opening your mouth, saying again what's right and what's wrong, not interested in Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. It's either right and just, or it's wrong and unjust, and we need to keep pointing that out. That could have a major, that will have, I'm not even going to say can have, that will have a major impact. The greatest revolutionary, counter-revolutionary act you could commit right now is to open your mouth and speak the truth about all these things. Everybody's heard us say that before on the show, and we're going to continue to say it, because that is one of the ways that you could begin. I'm not saying that's the ultimate way to change it, but that's the way you begin to change things, because then people will organize around what we're saying, because they realize, well, you know something? What those guys are saying actually is true. I've looked at it, I've examined it, I weighed it in my conscience, and what they're saying is true. I want to get on board with them. Let's see if we can find a solution.
Listen,
but that requires using your God-given reason and intelligence.
But you think about, Joe, I'll be honest, just to get back, you could talk about the election. You know, let's talk about basically Joe Biden going on CNN, a woman saying that she has an 8-year-old that wants to transition into another person's, into an 8-year-old girl wants to become a boy. And he's for that. Let's just isolate that right now. That disqualifies you, Biden. And America is not on board with that. As long as America sees that as okay, we're lost.
Right.
And this is why I'm saying what I'm saying. How is that possible that you could vote for that? How is it possible that you could vote for third trimester abortion? How is that possible? 85% of America is against it, but not enough to not vote for it.
Right.
That's why we're lost. You see, this is what I'm talking about. These issues aren't even hidden, yet people, good people, still vote for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem, people.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, I'm not even getting religious. What I'm saying is straight up and down priorities and common sense.
How about what we talked about? How about just sticking with founding principles?
And that is disturbing.
If you just want to keep it in terms of our United States Constitution, our founding principles in America, if you just want to keep it there, I don't see how you could throw God out of that argument. But nonetheless, if you just want to leave it there, then we need to get back to founding principles, one of which is that we have a right to life that is protected, that is talked about in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, and in the Declaration of Independence. Okay, we have a right to life. Why don't we assert that? And tell Planned Parenthood and the rest of them, and tell the Supreme Court, we don't care what you say. Send in the National Guard. Go ahead. We don't really care. But we don't do that. We don't form coalitions amongst the states like we were talking about, where states could come together and say, you know what, we're going to ban abortion in our 12 states. The governors and the state legislatures have gotten together and we're shutting down abortion. What's the Supreme Court going to do? What's Joe Biden going to do? Send in the National Guard to 12 states and force abortion on them? Well, if that's the case, then let's go to a civil war. Then it's Sonny Corleone. Then that's it. It's all out war. And we go to the mattresses. But force the issue. Even Asa Hutchinson in Arkansas, he didn't want to sign an abortion bill, but he did because he knew it would challenge Roe versus Wade. Good. Okay, he's a rhino. But nonetheless, he signed it. Force the issue.
But then that same man wouldn't sign a ban on castrating children.
I know.
You see, this is what I mean, guys. Right. These guys... Right and wrong means nothing. It means nothing. Like to them. I'm being honest with you. It means, because here's the deal. William said it perfectly. They're afraid of the press.
Yeah.
They're afraid of being canceled. How about being afraid of standing before God? How's that? How about this? Like our good friend Cincinnatus. Take your job. I don't want it.
Right. I'm going back to my plow.
But we don't, our country isn't there. And this is what scares me. Well, and I see it. I'm telling you right now, like, I see it. And I'll be truthful with you. Words, I thought that it was very clear. This election, taking the personalities out. I'm talking issues, disqualifying issues. I mentioned 2. It's not enough for America. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what else could change your mind when you could say that I can kill a baby in the womb at 8 months. I can permit an adult to change a child's sex at 8 through medical means, whether it's taking drugs or having an operation.
Right.
That's insane.
That is no. You used the right word. That is absolutely.
That is insane.
That
and
is
I'm
the definition
sorry.
of insanity.
And that was as clear as day on the news, and people voted for that.
Right.
That says to me, people, we're way gone. And until we kind of inch back, it's only going to get worse.
Let's
I don't know what to tell you.
Let's end on two notes. One is a more positive note. Again, we are not God. We don't possess the mind of God. We don't pretend to know the mind of God, but we do know some things from Scripture. Sodom and Gomorrah were so completely gone. That's what the Lord says to Abraham. If I find 10, I won't destroy it. We have a lot more than, let's say, a percentage of the population of good people in this country fighting against this evil. And I do believe that God is sparing us for the sake of those people. The chastisement, call it what you want. Call it a good old-fashioned biblical punishment, which is what America really is in store for because of abortion and other things like Joe was describing, okay? But I think there's a lot of good people in this country. I think we can motivate those people, and we could welcome, in all humility and on our knees, our good Lord back into our society and our culture. So we want to say that, because I know Joe agrees with me on that. The other thing is Michelle is in the chat room. She asked about the Crusade Channel. Crusade Channel, Michelle, you go crusadechannel.com, okay? And that's Mike Church's station out of New Orleans. But it's internet radio, so it broadcasts all over the place. You got my church, you got Rick Barrett, you got Mike from Restoring the Faith, and a whole bunch of others on there. And Joe on Monday, in the afternoon. And later on in the afternoon, and you could listen to us, and you could subscribe or do a free 30-day trial subscription, because it is a subscriber base. Joe and I don't receive any money from that. And you can go on there and you can listen to that great content, particularly the King Dude, which is Mike Church. He's got a great show. So that's the info we wanted to give you. Okay. Any final thoughts?
No, it was a good show.
Nah. That's so Jersey of you. Nah, I'm done. And please, Veritas Catholic Network. Joe and I have been doing some phenomenal interviews on there. Today we interviewed on there with Father Chris Alar. That one's up. It'll be archived tomorrow, so it'll be available in podcast. But download the app, Veritas Catholic Network. Download the app. We have now four interviews on there, and there's more to come once a week. We have Jesse Romero, Bill Donahue, where we talked about the Equality Act, Teresa Tomeo, and Father Chris Alar, and it's only getting better and better from here. So we're on a number of platforms thanks to your support and the grace of Almighty God, and we're very, very, very grateful. Please make sure, again, wherever you are watching the show, whether it's YouTube and Facebook, please like, subscribe, and share. Do that for us, please. I will, as one particular plea, we're at 976 subscribers on YouTube. Just to make Joe and I happy, help us get over 1,000. Go and subscribe to our page on YouTube before they shut us down. And in the meantime, we love you all. We pray for you all. We ask for your prayers in return. And remember, until next week, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation, it's going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening.